On today's show, win totals have been released in the NBA. I think the over is the easy answer for the Cleveland Cavaliers. That's all straight ahead on today's Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. You can find this show wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Be sure to leave us a 5-star review. Help us grow the show. You can also check us out on YouTube. Just search Locked On Cavs on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel. Like this video. Make sure you click that notification bell as well so you are alerted anytime something new goes up on Locked On Cavs, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. I'm Danny Cunningham, everyone. You might know me from my time covering the Cleveland Cavaliers at places like 92.3 The Fan, Cleveland Magazine, and a number of other stops along the way. Today, I want to talk about the win totals. Fanduel has put out their projections for the upcoming NBA season. I know it's a little early. I know some things can change, but I think now is a good time to check out what the sports book, Fanduel in particular, thinks of the Cleveland Cavaliers heading into the 2024-2025 season. So Fanduel has set the line, and if you're new to this, if you don't understand gambling, I will explain this. So they have set a line at 47.5 wins. You have the option to pick over if you think the Cavs will win more than that, or under if you think they will win 47 games or fewer. So 48 or more is the over, 47 or fewer is the under. Cavs are set at 47.5 right now. I think that this line is entirely too low. I don't gamble on the NBA. I use FanDuel for other sports, but I don't gamble on the NBA. But I struggle seeing a way in which the Cavs are not going to win at least 48 games next year. I think that, to me, this is a line that I really like the over for the Cavaliers, and I've got a number of reasons as to why. So the first one, since they traded for Donovan Mitchell, they've played 2 seasons, obviously. Year 1, they won 51 games. They were the 4th seed in the Eastern Conference. They lost in the first round of the playoffs to the New York Knicks. Obviously, that playoffs was a series to forget, but the regular season was a successful one. There was no doubt about that. This past year, the Cavaliers finished 4th in the East. They won 48 games, won a playoff series, lost in 5 games to the Boston Celtics, eventual world champions, in the second round. Why do I say all that? So I said they won 51 games in year 1 of Donovan. They won 48 games in year 2 of Donovan. So they didn't improve. But why would they fall further back? Why? What has happened this offseason to make you think that the Cavaliers might not be better this upcoming year? And I can understand if you don't think they improved, but did they get worse? I don't think so. I certainly don't think that they got worse. I think that the Cavs did a number of things that make me believe that they're going to win more regular season games this upcoming year. Maybe that doesn't translate to playoff success. I think that's a different conversation for a different day, because today and this number is all about regular season wins. It doesn't matter how we feel about the Cavs' chances in the playoffs. None of that matters. All that matters is how many games they will win in the regular season. I think it's going to be a number that's higher than 47.5. I think they will win at least 48 games. I would venture to guess they're going to win 50 plus games again. One of the reasons why last year they finished with only 48 wins was because of how beat up the team was all year. And the instant pushback to that is, well, Darius Garland and Evan Mobley were out and the team went 17-1, even though Garland and Mobley were back for the last 9 games of that stretch. But the team went 17-1 while they were beat up. How can you say that them being out is something that cost them wins? You're right about that, but you also have to look at, it's not just that stretch. There were a lot of stretches throughout the year. Donovan Mitchell did not play enough games to qualify for an All-NBA team. Evan Mobley didn't play enough games to qualify for an All-Defense team. The Cavs were not whole for the vast majority of the season. Of the 82 games they played last year in the regular season, they had their ideal starting lineup of Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, Max Strus, Evan Mobley, and Jarrett Allen, that group played 28 games together. That's a very low number for a starting lineup. And it's not just that that number was low because one guy missed time. That was, I believe, their most used starting lineup as well. So it's a combination of everybody with the exception of Jarrett Allen, who I believe he missed like the first 5 or 6 games. He had an ankle injury that he suffered in training camp. And then after that, he didn't miss another game. So he was really the only constant. But Max Strus missed time. Obviously, Darius Garland missed time. Evan Mobley missed time. Donovan Mitchell missed time. This team was so very rarely whole during the regular season. And I think that cost them wins. Now, if they would have won 1 or 2 more games, does that change how they perform in the playoffs? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. It probably changes their seeding just with how close the Eastern Conference was at the top outside of Boston. But the Cavs right now, to me, I think their floor is, if they're healthy, about what they finished last year. I think it's about 48 wins. And there are a couple of other reasons why I think so. Number one, the Cavs play a different style than everybody else just from their personnel. Now, we don't know exactly what they're going to look like on the floor under Kenny Atkinson. I'm going to talk about that in a second too. But as far as their personnel goes, they're a difficult team to prepare for. And yes, that is something that brings some shortcomings when the playoffs arrive because they don't have a ton of space, because offensively they've got 2 smaller ball-dominant guards. Totally get all those arguments. But on a random Tuesday night in February, the Cavs are a tough team to prepare for because they play a different style than so many other teams in the NBA. I know a complaint of a lot of fans are that every team looks the same in the NBA right now, that it's all pace and space, that it's all 3-point shooting, that it's very similar styles across the league. Now, those styles are absolutely successful in the playoffs. There's no doubt about that. And I think the Cavs need a little bit more of that when push comes to shove. But during the regular season, when you play, when you're good, obviously, like you have to have the talent here to be able to pull this off the way the Cavs do. But when you play a different style of basketball compared to the rest of the league, that I think is something that can help you to achieve regular season success. Because the Cavs play so often as a bigger team with 2 bigs in Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen, there are teams that are not used to defending that it throws them out of whatever rhythm they're in. And they're also not used to offensively trying to attack a team that has 2 big guys, one of which is I believe, going to be a perennial defensive player of the year candidate. So those are the things that you have to keep in mind when talking about how, yeah, stylistically they're different, and I think that hurts them in the playoffs. But in the regular season, I've got very few questions about if it can be successful because we've seen it be successful. And I think we will see it be more successful this upcoming year if everyone's healthy. The other thing that I do think will bring more regular season success, I think the Cavs are going to get a bit of a bump from playing under a new head coach. Sometimes, and this is not shade at JB Bickerstaff because I do think he's a good head coach. I just think it wasn't the right time for him anymore. But sometimes bringing a new voice into the locker room is something that just organically can kind of boost things up a little bit. That can help to make guys a little bit more energized, a little bit more excited in the regular season. And I do think the other part of Kenny Atkinson that is absolutely worth bringing up here is that offensively, they're going to look a little bit different. They're not going to look exactly like every other team in the NBA because of their personnel, but they are going to look different than they did last year. I expect Kenny to have a better offensive plan than what the Cavs had under JB Bickerstaff. And I think right there, the Cavs are billing that as that was their big move this year. I don't know if that big move is going to lead to more playoff success, but I think they're in a situation where it's really difficult for me to see them not be a good regular season team unless everything goes wrong. And even last year, almost everything went wrong at times, and they still won 48 games. They still would have hit the over on this mark of 47.5 games. So with that, I then start to think, okay, well, if everything went wrong last year, and I understand part of the reason why this number is down a little bit is because the Eastern Conference is better, because Philadelphia in particular got better. The New York Knicks, who were already above the Cavs, got better as well. And we will talk about some of the lines of the other teams in the conference and just how the Cavs compare coming up in a little bit. But I think that just because those other teams got better doesn't mean the Cavs got worse. Maybe they didn't get drastically better the way that some of these other teams did, I think there's a case for that. And if you've got questions about how this team can survive in the playoffs, I think that's a very different discussion. But as far as the regular season goes, maybe they didn't get a ton better personnel-wise, but with the built-in better health and I think an upgrade at coach, they didn't get worse. So this line was a little puzzling to me. I certainly think that this is going to be a team that, as long as Donovan Mitchell is healthy and the supporting cast is relatively healthy, I don't see how they're not a top 4 team in the East. I don't see how they're not a 50-win team in the East. Again, I don't know that it translates to playoff success, but I think the regular season success is something that I expect and something that I'd be very surprised if it didn't exist. I mentioned that there are a number of other teams that are sort of in the same neighborhood as the Cavs when it comes to their win totals on Fanduel. I want to tell you who those teams are and how I think they compare to the Cleveland Cavaliers next, right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime, of course, is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, and that makes it so much faster and easier to get to a Major League Baseball game. If you're listening to this Thursday morning, the Guardians play today at Progressive Field in Cleveland. If you want to go, Gametime, the place to go to find last-minute tickets, because there, prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer you get to first pitch. So maybe you're listening to this right now, it's about noon on Thursday, you think, hey, Guardians, Tigers, I want to check that out. Gametime is the place for you to go. Last time I went to a Guardians game with a ticket, I used Gametime to get in, had a great experience, and I know you will too, because they show you the all-in pricing. You know what you're going to pay when you're on the app. They also show you your view from your seat. That's a very important thing. I want to know what it's going to look like when I'm watching the game from where I'm going to be sitting. Gametime takes care of that. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account with Gametime, redeem code LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So the Cavs are not alone at 47.5 wins on FanDuel. There are a couple of other teams that are sitting at that same number. And I don't think that any of the teams that are sitting at the same number as the Cavs right now, at least in the Eastern Conference, are as good as the Cavaliers are. The first team I want to talk about is the Indiana Pacers. And I know what you're going to say. Oh, Indiana went to the conference finals. Tyrese Halliburton on the United States men's Olympic basketball team. There's such a bright future with the Pacers. Sure. I'm not sure I buy that quite as much. I sort of feel, and this is disrespectful to Indiana, and I get it, but I sort of feel as if they are what the Atlanta Hawks were the year Trae Young went to the Eastern Conference Finals. The Hawks went to the Eastern Conference Finals a few years ago. It was a great run, but you have to look at how the teams got there. You have to look at what happened. The Hawks made the Eastern Conference Finals because Ben Simmons forgot how to play basketball. Like, there's not a nice way to say it. That's part of the reason why they made the Eastern Conference Finals that year. Yeah, their first round win against the Knicks was awesome. Trae Young in MSG was amazing that year, but they ultimately made it because Philadelphia had a meltdown. You look at how Indiana got to the conference finals this year, where they got swept by Boston. Yeah, you can say it was a close sweep because the Pacers were in all 4 of those games, and I get that, but look at how they got there. First, they took on the Milwaukee Bucks. Didn't have Giannis for, I believe, the entire series. Maybe he played in game 1, but I believe the entire series he was out. Some of those games were still close, but they found a way to win that series because the other team's best player wasn't available. So they move on to the second round. They take on the New York Knicks. Knicks are a better team. By the end of that series, I'm surprised I didn't get a call from Leon Rose and the New York front office to try and get some minutes in, because that team was so beat up that, of course, the Pacers were able to find a way to win, and they deserve credit for doing so. Don't get me wrong. But then the first team they faced that was, one, not even fully healthy, because Kristaps Porzingis really didn't play in that series against the Pacers. The first team they faced that was at least resembling healthy swept them. So I would be selling Indiana right now. They're listed at 47.5. I think that's a bit too high. I think that they're going to be a team that takes a step back this year. Yeah, They play a fun, exciting style, but I think that they're a team that was a little bit early. I like what they did this offseason, but I still think that the Cavs are a better team. And I actually think that is reflected when you take a look at some of the other odds, where the Cavs and the Pacers are obviously in the same division, right? They're both in the Central Division. The Milwaukee Bucks, who we will talk about coming up in a minute, they're minus 140 to win the Central. The Cavs are plus 280. So what that means is if you bet $100 on the Cavs to win the Central and they win it, you win $280. The Pacers are plus 330. So they have longer odds to win the Central Division, but have the same win total. That for me tells me it's a good time to think that the Cavs are in a better spot. That despite having the same exact number, the Cavs are a better team right now. The other team in the Eastern Conference that's listed at 47.5 is the Orlando Magic. Obviously, we know the Magic story where they took on the Cavs in the playoffs last year, took the Cavs to 7 games, had an 18-point lead in Game 7 against the Cavs inside Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. Then the Cavs awoke from their slumber, turned it on, and found a way to win that game and ultimately win the series. This is a number I actually don't mind quite as much. I think that the Cavs and Magic are going to be in a very similar spot. I would probably still lean Cavs here just because I believe that they've got the best player between the two teams. I think Donovan Mitchell, if you put both teams together, Donovan Mitchell is the best player. Maybe Paolo Banchero gets there. Maybe this time next year, it's a different conversation. I have my doubts about that. But right now, Donovan Mitchell is the best player between these two teams. So if I had to pick between the two, I would take the Cavs to win more games than the Magic. Orlando's a really nice story. I think they've got a really nice young core. Even in adding Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, I'm not sure that they've got enough shooting. Maybe Franz Wagner rebounds from just what was a putrid performance shooting from the outside, not only in the playoffs, but in the regular season as well. But I don't think that that number for them is all that too far off. I very much could see a world where they are the 6th seed next year. And I think that would be, even though they're a seed worse, I think that could be considered a success. I do think that could be considered a success. The next team that is at 47.5 team, we're going to go over to the Western Conference, Memphis. I think this is a really interesting one, and this might be the first one that I would take over the Cavs, that I would take as they could be a team that wins more games than the Cavaliers. And the reason I think that is because John Morant, I think we're a little low. Like, we've forgotten just how good he is, where he's a fantastic talent. Obviously has not been able to stay out of trouble all the time off the floor and dealt with a significant injury this year that kept him out. It's easy to think that off the court troubles kept him out, but it was a shoulder surgery that he needed this year that made him miss the majority of the season. Memphis, we've forgotten about them, how good they are because they took a step back this year because they weren't healthy. If they are healthy, I think that they're probably a 50-win team, and we're going to be reminded very quickly just how good John Morant is. The other Eastern Conference team that I did want to talk about, the Milwaukee Bucks. They're listed at 50.5 wins on Fanduel for their total. And I thought this was very interesting because a lot of people this offseason, and sort of myself included, are down on the Milwaukee Bucks. While I think they maybe got a little bit better with some of the offseason additions they made, I'm not sure that I like them over 50 wins. I'm not sure of that. Because, yes, Giannis Antetokounmpo is one of the best players in the world. He's a magnificent talent, just fantastic basketball player. But look at the rest of that roster. It's not a roster that's very durable. Think of all the injuries Damian Lillard has had over the last several years and how much time he had to miss when he was in Portland at the end of his run with the Blazers. Quite a bit. Look at Chris Middleton, who word came out this week that Middleton had to have surgery, I believe not on just one, but both ankles. That's significant. Do you expect him to play 75 plus games? I don't think I do. Brook Lopez, there have been rumors about the Bucks wanting to move on from him this offseason. It's hard to be and he's been a very good defender. He's been a revelation as a three-point shooter since Kenny Atkinson made that move for him. That's been awesome. But is he going to be able to really help them as much as they thought? Is he going to be able to play as much at his age? I believe he's 38 years old. Those are the questions you have to be asking about this team. I think that they're sort of the inverse for the Cavs, where they might be a team to worry about come the playoffs if they're healthy, but they're also a team that I think is probably going to take it a little bit easier in the regular season, to where they might not win 50 games because Chris Middleton's not going to be available all the time, because Damian Lillard might not be available all the time, because Brook Lopez might not be available all the time. And oh, by the way, Giannis has had injury issues of his own too. So those are things to think about. The other two teams out west that FanDuel has, the three teams out west actually, that FanDuel has the Cavs as having better win totals than. The Phoenix Suns, they're set at 46.5. I think that's accurate. I think that's also, you can't count on all those guys to be healthy. They, for the most part, all miss a bunch of time. Kevin Durant was very healthy this past year. Obviously, as the Olympics are coming up, he's already dealing with a calf injury. But the West also being as tough as it is and just a deeper conference than the Eastern Conference, I think that's an appropriate line. I would expect the Cavs to have more regular season wins than them. Sacramento is also set at 46.5. I think DeMar DeRozan's going to raise their floor a little bit. They might be similar to the Cavs in the sense that they could be a good regular season team, but I've got some significant doubts about them in the playoffs. And then lastly, the New Orleans Pelicans, 45.5, I think is a little bit low. That said, I think that this is one that I'm just unsure of, because they could be a team that still makes a move this offseason. Brandon Ingram hasn't been traded, but that doesn't mean he won't be traded. And I just think that is something that it's worth noting as we think about this. There are a couple of other things that came out on FanDuel that I do want to talk about as far as the Cavs go that I find interesting. So we're going to do that next right here on Locked On Cavs. Thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. And are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Do you have to turn down the volume with all the shouting? Well, I'm here to tell you to make the switch to Locked On Sports Today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel that's programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news. Streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So a few of the other things that I wanted to talk about, and not all of the odds are out yet. Like, we don't have odds for Evan Mobley to win Defensive Player of the Year. Nothing is on the board for that as of this moment, but there were a few. So one I already touched upon a little bit. The Cavs are plus 280 to win the NBA Central Division. I think that's intriguing. Now, winning the division doesn't matter, as we saw last year. Like, had the Cavs really wanted to win the Central Division, they would have played everybody and played to win the last game of the regular season. They didn't do that because you don't gain anything except for a leg up in tiebreakers by winning your division. That's really all it's worth these days. Back in the day, it used to be worth much more. You used to guarantee yourself home court advantage. Now, that's no longer the case. So they're plus 280 there. I think there's a decent chance they do win the division. I talked about a bunch about Milwaukee's age and how much that is something that could factor into their win total this season. So that's something to keep in mind. They're plus 2,000 to win the Eastern Conference. I found it curious. They have the same odds as the Orlando Magic here. I just found that very curious because the Cavs are more playoff tested. The Magic have not won a series. Paolo Banchero's awesome. I think that's a lot of projection. That said, I would be very surprised if obviously either one of these teams won the Eastern Conference. I think that would be something that would be surprising to me. They are plus 5,000 to win the NBA Finals. It's quite a long shot. The thing that popped out to me when I was looking at this is Orlando actually has shorter odds here. Orlando is plus 4,000 to win the NBA Finals, while the Cavs are plus 5,000. Not quite sure I fully understood that. I don't necessarily know why that's the case. And then the last two that I've got, they're plus 2,500 to win the NBA Cup, formerly known as the midseason tournament. Their group obviously is a little bit of a difficult one, having Boston in there. We haven't really talked a ton about that. I will be diving into that coming up just in about a week or so. But their group is a little tough, so I can definitely get on board with those odds. And then lastly, Donovan Mitchell to win NBA MVP. Plus 10,000. Maybe take a flyer. Maybe. I don't think he's going to get to that level. I expect him to be back at an all-NBA level this year if he's healthy. I think he was at that level last year had he been healthy. But NBA MVP might just be a little bit too much. Might be a little bit of a bridge too far. But thank you for making today's Locked On Cavs your first listen. Make Locked On Cavs your first listen every single day. You can find the show wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, or if you're listening on podcasts right now, make sure you are subscribed. Make sure you leave a 5-star review as well. It's how you can help to grow the show. If you're watching the show on YouTube, hit that like button, click the thumbs up for me, make sure you're subscribed, and click that notification bell as well. If you're not watching on YouTube, go watch on YouTube, click the like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Help us grow the show. You guys have been awesome. Cannot wait to be back tomorrow. We've got so much more Cavs stuff to talk about as you make this your first listen every day.